we talk so much in life about timing is everything, right? And it's always finding that delicate balance of just going ahead and testing something out, and sitting back and waiting and seeing, right? And so I think as fundraisers, it's important for us to talk about this topic. How much cultivation does a donor need before we ask? And while there's no one size fits all approach, I think we can take some of the science of what we know and the art of being a fundraiser and marry those together. And hopefully with our experiences, you will learn something to really get yourself motivated and positioned well in your cultivation process. So to kick us off today, I am pleased to hand it over to Jim Lyons.
Great, Marty. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. This is a topic that I enjoy a lot because I think it's one of those things, and it's one of those areas that we have a tendency to overthink a great deal as far as, we've really got to take some time to get somebody just to exactly the right point and ask them at exactly the right time. And I can't tell you how many instances over the years since I've been in this field that we have missed out because we have delayed that ask, thinking that they needed cultivation more than we thought, and somehow our opportunity goes away, or they get forgotten about, or some other organization gets them involved, and so we get into that kind of a situation. Very easy to delay the ask, trying to overthink the cultivation steps. Next slide, please. What is cultivation? Really, it's just trying to get the prospective donor comfortable and knowledgeable enough for us to ask. It's important, obviously, just from the standpoint of establishing a trust relationship between either you, the organization, or even you as an individual fundraiser, to establish that and to get them comfortable enough to have a conversation about a significant gift. One of the things that I think is very important, and something that I've learned, well, I don't know if it's the easy way or the hard way over the years, but cultivation does not always occur before the request for the gift. It would not be unusual that we make a request for a gift and then the cultivation process most of it takes place after that request. Particularly can happen with major donors. Major donors may need less initial cultivation than even smaller donors, because they're a sophisticated donor. I mean, they're going to know what questions to ask. They're going to know what their interests are. We're not going to, sneak up on anybody with a cultivation technique. And I mean, they know why we're talking to them, and that's fine. They understand that. And so it's important to keep in mind that the cultivation doesn't always necessarily occur solely before the request for the gift. Next slide, please. We talk about, kind of different ways to cultivate, connect with people and engage, and how do we determine the sweet spot between cold calls, coffee, and full-blown relationships. This actually relates very closely to the whole process that we use in fundraising, which is identification, engagement, cultivation, the solicitation of the gift, recognition, and then finally stewardship. Stewardship being the cultivation for the next gift. And cold calls tend to be the identification process. We're cold calling people. We're trying to figure out if they're a reasonable prospect or not. We sit and have coffee or have some type of a casual contact with them. That's more the engagement. We're trying to get them engaged to a certain degree, either with us personally, so that we can talk more about our organization and what we're doing. And then as you get into the full-blown relationship, that's when you're really in the cultivation stage, where there's enough of a trust relationship there to have conversations about a gift, about your project, about your cause, and where you're going. One thing that's key in this area when we're thinking about relationships, and it really points to the importance of our fundraising volunteers, our board members, is that they can be most helpful if they have knowledge of an individual prospective donor about what's appropriate as far as cultivation is concerned. They may know what appeals in terms of approach. They may know what appeals in terms of a cause or a project. So the involvement of our fundraising volunteers and our board members is key in this process. And it's key to the point even sometimes where that relationship may be, the most important piece of the cultivation process. In other words, somebody may say, I don't know too much about your organization, but I see that that Steve Weekland's involved, in your organization. I think a lot of Steve, and I'll consider it, knowing that he wouldn't be involved in it if he didn't think it was a good cause. So sometimes the relationships that people have and that connection is one of the most important aspects of the whole cultivation process. Next slide, please. I'm going to step through a couple of go to the next slide. To the annual ask, there's kind of three different kinds of gifts. I think the next slide after that, please. When we talk about an annual ask, that really is, more about small gifts, more about what we're trying to accomplish there. They're entry level. We know that annual giving is a numbers game. It's a way to get started. Often when we don't know too much about the capacity of an individual donor, I think one of the things that we look at tend to be, certainly we use direct mail frequently, some personal contact depending on the status of your staff and your time availability, impact updates, those kinds of things. But usually this is one of those situations where we may not know much about a particular prospective donor when we make the ask, if it's through electronic media or whether it's through snail mail, whatever it may be. And that's okay. As the time frame on this can be short or long, from the time that we ask until the time they respond to either a personal request or a request that comes through direct mail, something of that nature. As we look at an actual example of that on the next slide, please. It'd be a situation where somebody would respond to a direct mail. They would send us a check for $100. We'd send them a thank you, personalized, we hope, to that donor, include their names in the newsletter, and have an event to celebrate if they're qualified at a certain level. And those are all cultivation steps that have occurred after they've made the gift. So they've responded to that direct mail piece. Then you're doing the steps, to cultivate them further. Then there's the opportunity there, that last bullet where it says implement a personalized ask, which may be either for a larger gift, for a multi-year pledge, something of that nature. So we launched that initial opportunity as far as a gift that may come from a direct mail or some other contact. Use the cultivation steps to set us up for the next ask, which may be hopefully at a higher level. Next slide, please. We're talking about businesses. The business gift is a little bit of a different animal because businesses do give for business reasons. They have to be able to justify their gift to their stockholders or their board and their employees or whatever it may be. And it's important to think about them a little bit differently. Many times businesses may already be giving to us in terms of sponsorship dollars to an event. We want to be able to go to those businesses and talk to them about an additional gift, not necessarily in place of that sponsorship gift, but a blended gift. And we really want to talk to those businesses about, the recognition, the networking, and, their visibility in the community. For the most part, businesses will give because they have a desire to be known as a good corporate citizen, to have some recognition, some visibility. It's good for marketing, whatever it may be. So as we look at those businesses, it's important, to keep in mind that we probably don't have necessarily a lot of cultivation steps before the ask. In this case, we go and talk to them about a gift and see what happens. The recognition is important, and the competition between businesses is important. That's particularly true of the banks. Banks kind of key off of each other when we're going to a bank for a gift to a campaign. The banks talk to each other about how much they're going to give and what's appropriate and who's got the higher profile and who's got the business and that sort of thing. So the competition part of it is important, but the networking within that business community is key. Very, very crucial to think about the kind of visibility that the business may be involved with. And the things that you're doing in recognition will help set up that cultivation step for businesses you haven't asked yet. So that's important. Next slide, please. Always, we want to get to know their leadership. If we've got fundraising volunteer board members, if we know them, that's key. Conversations about shared values is important, but we know as much as anything, those shared values tend to be, they're community based. We want a stronger community, we want a better community, whatever your organization may be, contributes to the well-being of your community. It's important. And so always be thinking about that, be thinking about those business reasons to give. And from a cultivation standpoint, probably the presentation, again, continuing about recognition and so forth is at the top of the list. Peer relationships are a key. If we can get our fundraising volunteers from the business community involved in helping to ask other businesses, that has great leverage. And so we want to be able to utilize those relationships in that cultivation process because of that endorsement that those volunteers may have with that particular individual or prospective business donor. And I think the thing about businesses is that we think, well, they've got their very specific processes in place and they've got giving policies and so forth. And that's all true. They have to fit in within that, but they're still individual people making decisions. And the relationship part of that is a big deal and a big part of what we're trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. We're talking about special asks, special gifts, tend to be larger gifts. And these are gifts that tend to change, the organization, tend to make a real difference, have a significant impact as a single important gift. This is one of those situations where very often we will go to an individual for a significant gift before we've had very many cultivation steps, if you will. And that's okay because you're usually talking to people who are used to being asked, number one, and number two, used to making a difference with significant gifts. So the level of sophistication makes a huge difference. The same kind of tools that we have as far as coffee and lunch and individual connections, tours of our facilities, if we have one that works for that, face-to-face volunteer connections, all of those things are important. This, as far as how long it takes in terms of the cultivation, it can take some time. Sometimes they can make a very quick decision. Sometimes it can take some time. I've had a number of situations where we've gone to a donor where we thought was ready to be asked, and they weren't taken aback by a request, but it took them a while to come to the point where they made the decision about the gift. All those steps that we took occurred between the time we asked for the gift and the time we received the gift. So special ask is important. Next kind of slide is an example of that. We always want to pair volunteers. This is a key area where people certainly give to people, and those relationships with volunteers and senior leadership is important as far as trying to determine donor interests. This is an area where we can afford to take a significant amount of time to develop a strategy for that potential major donor. I think the thing that that's key here is take the time to make the strategy without necessarily needing to say we're going to take a long time to cultivate. Have a good plan in place. It's going to be very, very different for people at this level when they're talking about significant gifts and being able to do something that's going to have great impact for you and your organization. Some we may get some indication that we should go to them very quickly. They may need to have an invitation to lunch. Getting the volunteers and the people who know those individuals involved is going to be key. and taking the time to develop those cultivation strategies for those major donors, whether those cultivation strategies occur before or after the request, is something that's worthwhile to take some time to put together. So, uh, and again, that solicitation is made once the trust is established and donor interest is confirmed. But we may need to develop that interest. We may need to, and they may be supporting a number of different organizations in the community with large gifts, and we may need to develop that interest with them even after we've made a request. So this is worth taking some time when we're talking about major gifts and those steps, and really taking the time to come up with a good strategy for every single one. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Marty Barrow.
Thank you so much, Jim. And before I get into the planned giving ask, and it's definitely applicable for that as well, I'm just going to restate one of my favorite stats. The number one reason why people don't give is because they weren't asked. So to kind of echo Jim's comments on, if we overthink it too much and we try and look for that perfect time, or we try to cultivate up to the ask too much, we have lots of missed opportunities. So hopefully you can use these tools that we're talking about today to really make sure that we are getting out there and making asks, because that cultivation can be before, during, and after, right? So hopefully as we look forward to the planned giving ask, you hopefully have established relationships with lots of people. I think we look at the planned gift as the ultimate gift, right? We know that it is 9 times out of 10 the very largest gift that anyone will ever give, right? They will be definitely leaving something more meaningful and significant if they choose to leave a planned gift for your organization. It can get overlooked from time to time because it is not immediate cash in hand now, right? And unfortunately, we all have missions that need funding now, and cash is king oftentimes, and we're focused so much on those asks. But I do want to make sure we spend a little time thinking about planned giving, because it is powerful, right, in terms of recognition and amount. So we know that people inspire people, and if we have perhaps a legacy circle, heritage circle of people who have made that significant commitment to our organizations, and we publicize that, we know that it can inspire others. But the fact of the matter is that is a piece of the cultivation process, that recognition, right? We know that we have access to professionals and education on how to establish estate plans and things like wills. I think one of the big things to remember for those people who are just getting started with planned gifts, and always while we're working on this, is that, we're really there to be a supporter. We've already established a relationship. I mean, it's very rare that you get a planned gift opportunity from someone who hasn't already made a gift of some time to your organization. So they already have some sort of a relationship to you. And if you, as the professional, can sort of look at yourself as a advisor to them and a friend to them, and helping to make sure that you're approaching what's going on with their personal situation, and care that they have a plan, right? That you have been so involved and invested in us as an organization and the work that's being done in the community. Have you thought about leaving a planned gift and leaving a legacy and moving that forward? So I think we oftentimes need to sell the idea of a planned gift and the fact that we care about them as a person, that we already have a relationship and that they have a plan. And is there anything that we can do to help you work through that plan, right? Time on this is definitely going to take some time, because they have to, again, 95% of the time have already established some sort of a loyalty to your organization and some sort of a relationship with you. So that's more than likely going to be at least 6 months before you're having a conversation about a planned gift. It can obviously be more. Oftentimes we find someone who's very unassuming, who's been giving for years and years and years, and we uncover the opportunity for them to perhaps consider a planned gift. So it can be more than that as well. Let's walk through a planned giving example, because I think, again, a lot of times people are like, well, it's really scary to talk to someone about thinking about the end of their life. People don't like to talk about that, right? So how can we sort of plant these seeds, right? So by inviting our current donors, those people who have already established a relationship and loyalty to us, to an educational event by your plan giving committee on, how to establish a will. Unfortunately, there are still way too many people out there that don't have a plan, and don't have a will. And you never know when you planting that seed and inviting them, makes them say, hey, you know what, I need to make a will, or I need to update my will. Something has changed in my life, and I might just need a little refresher on that, right? So if we invite those people who already are engaged with our organizations to some sort of an educational program, and start the conversation, it gets them thinking, right? It gets them thinking about what their plans are and how, their charitable interests might fit into that in some ways. So those people that indicate an interest, we want to have a special follow up with them, as part of that cultivation. Hey, came to our event, you asked some questions. Is there anything else that I can, do for you? Do you have any questions about our organization? What types of things are you thinking about? How can I help you? Really looking at them and their personal situations and your relationship with them, and can I help you think through anything? Of course, naturally, your organization will come up, but it's kind of the first them. Think about them and how you can help them. And naturally, if they're already have a relationship with your organization, they'll have questions, and we can go down that path, where we can then ask them to consider joining our legacy society. After we have strengthened that relationship, that trust, you've answered questions about the future of your organization, you've helped them kind of talk through what they're thinking about, as far as their personal legacies and their personal plans. And those are all very, very powerful things, very, very, case by case personal situations. But I think if you look at yourself on the planned gift ask as someone who, is sort of a friend to them, to help them walk through the process and think about with care what their future, looks like, it will organically and naturally go down the right path, that perhaps if they're thinking about leaving a planned gift to anyone, that your organization might be on that list, right? All right. So let's kind of do a little bit of a recap and simplify things a bit, right? Let's make our life a little bit easier when it comes to cultivation. Always, always, always pairing with a volunteer who knows a prospect well is going to shorten the time needed to cultivate and establish trust. And I would argue, even if you have a relationship that you think is strong and you feel good about, if you add in a volunteer who also has a relationship, they are giving of their time, their resources. You're the paid professional as the fundraiser. That just also helps to establish that trust. It's not just, well, of course, I'm going to be asking for consideration of a gift because that's my job, right? But if we have someone who's a volunteer, we can shorten that time if we don't have a relationship, and we can also add that trust factor of, hey, I've put my money where my mouth is, join me in support, right? um, I think if you are in a organization where you are sort of following a stewardship map, where you are going through what you know that you need to do to have touch points with your donors in a significant, meaningful way, that they are not only hearing from you when you're making an ask, this also helps the cultivation, as Jim talked about, that sort of life cycle of a donor. If we are doing all the things that we know to be true to help with stewardship, that is cultivating for next gifts as well. When you have a relationship beyond, they only call me when they want something, it makes it much more, meaningful, and much more likely that you're going to get that next gift. When we take the time to get to know our donors and prospects, that is going to mean that we have a higher success rate on that first ask, right? If we actually ask them questions about themselves and take the time to listen, we start to not only get to know them, but we also see how their passions align with your mission. And you say some of the things that would be meaningful to them. And it's a win-win situation all around. So really important to take the time to get to know your donors and prospects. So, we say we don't want to rush to the ask and offend someone, but we definitely want to make sure that we are making asks and we are getting those conversations going. And when we're asking about who they are and what's important to them, that surely is an authentic and meaningful way to cultivate them. Using recognition events to highlight and share impact. Recognition events can be so powerful when we get a room full of people together who are all there for the similar purpose, and we highlight all of what their generosity has helped make possible, share the impact of their giving. That really makes people feel good. And you see that when you're together for a common cause. People want to be making a difference and they want to be doing it together in fellowship with others. So utilizing recognition events is a really, really powerful cultivation tool as well. That helps to keep them engaged in your mission and your outcomes, right? So finding other ways throughout the year to keep your people engaged with your mission and what is happening, and what kind of outcomes the work that you're doing are making possible. It can be little things. It can be phone calls. It can be text messages. It can be little impact cards. There are all kinds of ways to sort of steward your donor and continue to cultivate them. And again, you may have already made an ask to someone that seemed interested, but you haven't gotten that gift. By sharing, new information with them and keep them engaged, even though you haven't gotten that gift yet, that is cultivation, right? So it's very, very important to sort of look at your stewardship and your cultivation side by side and use the tools that you already have created for stewardship with those donors who maybe haven't made their gift yet, because that cultivation is happening throughout that life cycle. Train your volunteers and make sure that they become an extension of your development team. If you are not utilizing volunteers to help you, you are missing the boat. Again, while they are enabling you a shorter cultivation time to the ask, they are also helping to steward and cultivate to that next ask, and they are invaluable to your process. So if you are able to empower and equip with tools your volunteers, they can truly be an extension of your development team and can be even better than having an additional FTE on your team. But you've got to train them, and good news is we do that. So anytime you're feeling those lulls, we can always sort of infuse some new training to get them re-engaged and re-supported towards that cause. Next slide, please. Just a couple of things again on this, do go with your gut. If you feel like it's not the right time and you need to cultivate more, you can do that, right? But don't fall into the trap of over cultivating and never getting around to asking. If you took someone to lunch with the intention of asking them for a gift and they shared something personal with you that might be devastating to their personal financial situation, and you ask them for a gift, that shame on you, right? That was not the right moment. But if you continue to over cultivate and you say, well, but I'm doing prospect research and we're gonna rate our prospects and we're gonna do all these things, but you never ever schedule meetings to sit and talk with people and make asks, you are also missing the boat. So make sure that we find that balance. Next slide, please. Just final recap, and I would say effective cultivation really leads to increased donor satisfaction, increased numbers of donors, increases in dollars through the door, and your mission going much further through the power of philanthropy. If we make sure that we are paying attention and cultivating, all of these things will go up. And that's the name of the game, right? You want to maximize your fundraising revenue so you can have the very greatest impact on your community through your missions as possible. And your community can help you do that through the power of philanthropy. So with that, I would love to entertain any questions that anyone has for us today.
I have a question, Marty.
Yes, Jeannie.
So we've had a couple of like my major gift donors that have moved out of the area. So I've kept in touch with, just different things, texting them and, checking in. Like a couple of them live in Santa Cruz and we had terrible flooding there. So checked in on that and, sent him a couple things. But are there any like special things that I should be doing? Because I feel like they're going to lose the connection with the agency since they're not like living in the community anymore. So any ideas around that?
Fabulous question, Jeannie. And I think, I mean, so smart to keep those relationships going, because whether or not they are there in your community or are coming back to your community or have moved on for good, you don't know those things necessarily. People's time and circumstances change. And I think as long as they are continuing to, for lack of a better word, be very receptive to your continued contact with them, I would keep doing what you're doing. But I would also make sure that you are continuing to make asks in whatever ways possible, because I think people will tell you, right? If they're like, hey, Jeannie, I love you. We had a great relationship. I want to stay in touch, but I'm super not interested in supporting the cause anymore because I have dove in headfirst with another organization, my new community. I wish you all the best. If there's anything I can do, people will do that, I think. So I think if you just continue to steward and cultivate those relationships without actually having the solicitation piece, you're not really going to know. And I don't know if that answers your question or not. And I don't know if you've made asks or not with that. But to me, that's my biggest, through something like that, my biggest challenge to you is to make sure we are still telling them we need their support and we want them to stay involved.
Okay, well, I'm going to make an ask then. Thanks.
Good job. Let me know how it goes. I'm excited to hear, because I
I
think
will.
they might be like, well, are they going to ask me anymore? And they might, they might say, hey, thank you so much. I'm excited. I'm coming back to town and I want to see what's happening and those types of things. So
And Marty, what you said about, I didn't give because I wasn't asked. I had asked someone just for a gift for our upcoming gala. And she owns a business that does recycling work with our thrift stores. And I saw her name on, a program from another agency's, fundraising event. So I called her. I'm like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. Blah, blah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So I asked, and she goes, well, I was wondering how long it was going to take for someone to ask me. Because she'd been, connected with our agency for a couple of years. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, you are right.
Yep. Yeah, we just don't know until we ask. And I think that's, if you take nothing away, everyone, from today, make sure we are asking, because while cultivation is important, it may be before, it may be during, it may be after. And your job is to put those opportunities out there, and people know that you're a nonprofit that has, needs to be philanthropically funded, and they expect to be asked. So thank you for sharing, and great question, Jeannie. Any other questions?